This is my Honda Nt650. You guys are probably pretty familiar if you've watched my channel in the last year with this motorcycle, but what does this motorcycle feel like to ride? I've given you some impressions over the last year of ownership, but I thought I'd make a dedicated video on exactly what it feels like to ride this motorcycle. So let's hop onto the machine, put some heat into the engine, take it out, and I'll show you guys and tell you guys what it feels like to actually ride one of my favorite bikes that I didn't even know about until I bought it.
You know, it's not too warm anymore. If you guys watched the video from a couple of weeks ago, I took the GB out for the first time. Well, it's a few days later, and let's just say that it's no longer 50 degrees. Today, it was supposed to be like 45, but it's currently 37 or so. Take a second to warm up these tires, but if you've ever wondered what it's like to ride a Honda Nt650, what this bike feels like, thinking about getting one for yourself, well, I made a few videos last year when I first picked this thing up that this was one of the most just surprising bikes that I've ever put my legs around. I just did not expect this bike to do what it does. The very first thing you notice around this motorcycle is that it's not that big. It is a 650 V-twin. It's water cooled. It has that little radiator down there that really isn't intrusive whatsoever. This motorcycle, if you're someone who's taller, mentioned this in the past, if you're taller than 6 foot, you're getting to 6'2", 6'3", you're probably going to find yourself a little too big for this machine. The previous owner was like 6'3", 6'4" on this bike, and you can see he lowered the clip-ons underneath the triple tree instead of having the high-rise bars which came from the factory. I actually don't mind this setup whatsoever, so I've chose to leave it. What I do want to do to it is to do regular clip-ons, but that's something we'll talk about in the future. After swinging your leg on this motorcycle, you'll notice that it is extremely light. This thing feels like there is nothing between your legs, especially if you're someone who's come from some larger displacement machines or even just full-fared sport bikes. I'm someone who's rode a decent amount of vintage bikes, things like that. This thing feels like there is nothing between your legs, and it's an awesome feeling because it's super lightweight and simply just flickable. This thing is so comfortable around corners. It's really confidence inspiring as well. My confidence going around corners and things like that has increased a ton after stepping onto this machine. The bike is also very narrow. If you're someone who's a little bit on the heavier side, you'll once again most likely find yourself just a tad bit uncomfortable on the bike because of how skinny it is. I mean, if you just look at like the tank and everything, the tank, the seat, the whole positioning of this motorcycle is very, very slim. I suppose since we're in a little bit of traffic right now, I can talk about the heat management of the bike, as well as kind of how it feels to ride it in normal city settings. This bike is awesome to just buzz around town at lower speeds. It does it without a problem. The liquid cooling manages the heat phenomenal on the bike. Right now we're pretty much just air cool. Obviously the liquid is still circulating through, but the fans are most likely not on. The only time I really got this thing to go anywhere on that needle is a really, really hot day. I was watching supermoto races up at Road America, and this bike and I ran into a little bit of traffic that day. We were sitting outside the event waiting to get in. It was probably a good 85, 90 degrees out, and I had the bike running, slowly just going bumper to bumper traffic. And that's the only time I saw it creep up. Traffic like this, environment like this, you'll never see this bike creep up. If I'm not moving constantly, and keep in mind I have lowered clip-ons on this bike, which definitely do interfere with this, my back does get a little tired. With regular clip-ons, which I want to do to it, I just feel like the bike is going to perform phenomenally, just having my back a little bit higher. Maybe if you're a little taller, it'd be fine. Like at speed, the wind pushes my chest completely fine. When I'm riding around in some lower speeds, my back definitely starts to ache. But the big thing is, when you start getting this bike out on some open roads like this, start getting them into speed, the bike just feels phenomenal. That V-twin has a very, very meaty mid-range, and it's everything that you love. You know, the top end of the bike definitely tapers down a little bit, but it revs out all the way to 8,500 RPM. But just really the sweet spot, you feel all the torque right here in this RPM range.
Hold on, a little bit of a rude interruption, but if you are enjoying the video so far, do me a huge favor, leave a like and subscribe to the channel because it goes a long way in helping the channel grow and continue to make great videos like this.
Inline 4 cylinders obviously have that crazy top end, while these bikes have that mid-range, which I just find to be awesome, because you can just keep it in very modest RPMs, 4,000 or 5,000, hit the throttle, and the bike will just get moving. You just want a bike that's a true enthusiast experience. Raw, analog, handles just amazing. This is the right bike for you. Canyon riding would be amazing, backstreet riding of any type. This is the bike. This bike is awesome for things like that. And if you do have one of these bikes and you have not yet put a jet kit on it, and you have not put an aftermarket muffler on it, aftermarket muffler and intakes don't have to necessarily be straight pipes and pod filters. I usually frown upon pod filters, usually because people do them to vintage bikes that they don't really know what they're doing, to be honest with you. But with this bike, there are some very nice kits out there. We're going to be doing a video sometime in the near future with another Hawk. We're going to be doing exactly this treatment, exactly what was done to this bike, the exhaust, the intake, and the carbs. We're going to rejet the bike, and we're actually going to compare them, contrast them, and see how much it really awakens the machine, because it's a significant difference. Pod filters, a mild exhaust like I have. My bike is on the louder side, but it's not excruciatingly loud, and if you just keep it under 3,000 RPM, it's not obnoxious at all. The second you downshift it, you want to open it up. It makes some good noises, but it's not crazy. A mild exhaust, or exhaust like mine, a Super Trap perhaps, will transform how this bike feels. It's not necessarily about horsepower. It's not necessarily about making the bike go faster, but it's just about getting a little bit of extra throttle response out of the bike, a little bit of extra mid-range out of the bike, and just making it a little bit more enjoyable. If you don't like loud bikes, I totally understand it. Loud bikes aren't always necessary. I love loud bikes, but I also love bikes that are just bone stock. You can just drive without attracting too much attention, especially if you are someone who is older. I know some of my older guys, they don't like to have loud bikes. They just want something that they can go and just have fun on. Putting an aftermarket exhaust on a bike doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make it louder. These bikes, unfortunately, you gotta make them flow a little bit. You have to make them breathe. The intake and the exhaust are very restricted from the factory, which was one of the reasons, one of the many reasons that this bike didn't necessarily sell, is because people would go out and they would ride one of these bikes, test ride them, and then they would just say that it's super sluggish and the bike doesn't really have any soul to it. Right around these RPMs on the bike we're going to be modifying, the bike just really is soulless. It just feels like the bike is being choked. It feels like there's something wrong with the machine, to be honest with you, after riding this one and then hopping onto it. If you guys haven't been following my channel at all, this bike right here I bought with all these mods done to it. It's not super modified, which is the reason why I was okay with the mods. They're the proper mods. The guy knew what he was doing. He put a nice exhaust, the proper jets, the proper intake, the proper kind of breathers on it and everything like that. I do have a lot of the stock pieces as well, so all the stuff that he did was not intrusive, was not kind of disrespectful to the bike. It just made the bike perfect. It took the bike from a very nice machine to dialing it in to that extra extent that Honda should have. I'm sure the reasons that Honda restricted it were either because of fuel consumption or emissions reasons. That's the only two things I can think of, because you're not really affecting the reliability of the machine by making it breathe better. In fact, you might be making it a little bit more reliable because the bike isn't choked up as much. Coming out to one of my favorite roads. We came here in the first ride I did for the season. Just some nice twisty corners here. Exactly what this bike is made for. Like, there's no way I'm going 75 right now. This bike embodies everything that I love about riding. Just a very raw, visceral experience. Nothing other than you and the bike. An analog machine that has inputs. Whatever you do to the bike is what it's going to do. Obviously, newer motorcycles are like that as well. Any machine is. It's not going to do something that you don't want it to do. But new technology is awesome. ABS, traction control, all of those things save riders on a daily basis. But it's not always something that you want. Sometimes you want the bike to just be turned off a little bit. Carburetors are a little bit more finicky than fuel injection is, but the throttle response, the sound, the induction noise, all of the things you get from carburetors, like right here, just revving the bike up with those aftermarket intakes on the bike sounds so good. And it's not even the exhaust noise alone, the intake noise, all of just the mechanical sounds and emotion you get out of a bike like this is what I love and how I love to ride motorcycles. If I bought a Hawk that didn't have the jets and the exhaust, I probably wouldn't rave about this bike as much as I do, perhaps until I did upgrade the jets and put the exhaust and the intake on. And I do want to do a little bit more comparing, and I do want to bring a little bit more attention to this machine. First of all, these bikes are very rare. They only made about 4,000 of them. About 1,000 of them have been wrecked, destroyed, brought to a point where it's not justifying them to mod them back to factory setting or somewhere where it'd be a nice bike, or perhaps just they were turned into track bikes and once again just not worth bringing back to a factory setting. With that said, this would be an amazing track bike. I've been searching for a little bit for one of those bikes that has been modded just a little bit too much, modded a little bit too poorly to bring back to a factory setting to kind of do a little bit of a race build on. I would absolutely love to have one of these bikes as a track bike. Out of the other 3,000 or so that are left, and I'm saying that being very generous, there's more like half of them left most likely, but out of those that are left, 3,000 is not a lot of bikes. But if you wanted one, you can get your hands on it, and that's the big part. And that's why I do want to just bring the attention to this machine that, hey, if you guys have one of these bikes, do yourself a favor and at least intake jets. Intake and jets will make this bike ride awesome. I've enjoyed the ride so far, but these last 5-10 minutes, I can't lie, I am freezing. We're getting back into town a little bit, so it should be a little bit warmer.
And that's all we have for the video. I absolutely love my Honda Hawk. If you guys did enjoy this video, do me a huge favor, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video.